Again, my name is Erica. I'm with Quest Travel Adventures, and I'm going to talk to you a bit today about the Azores. If you have questions that you don't think are being answered in my presentation, please go ahead and put them in chat, and we will have a little Q&A at the end. So let's get started and talk a little bit about the Azores. This is a very visual destination. People have been coming across it a lot because you see it on Pinterest. And so hopefully some of these photos that we have in the presentation today will inspire you to want to go there or send your clients there. The number one question that I am asked every single day is, where are the Azores? So here at Quest Travel Adventures, we specialize in the Atlantic island groups. So the island groups that are part of Europe in the Atlantic islands. You can take a look right here and see that the Azores are actually very conveniently located to the United States, to the East Coast. They're actually just a 5-hour flight from Boston and JFK, just under 2.5 hours from Lisbon. They're about the same weather, I would say, as maybe like towards Virginia, in terms of a very mild climate, but it will never snow. In this same picture, you can kind of see some other island groups to the east and to the south. The first little island there you'll get to is Madeira, which we also sell packages to. And then the islands that you see a little lower on the screen are the Canary group belonging to Spain. But today we're just going to talk about the Azores. So like I said, just under a 5-hour flight from Boston, JFK. There are nonstop flights from Boston every single day, and there are nonstop flights from JFK, depending on the time of the year, 3 days a week to daily flights. So it's a very easy destination to get to. With Boston and JFK being hubs, it's also very easy to connect from other destinations. And then seasonally in the summertime, we also get flights out of Newark that are direct to the Azores. So your clients can easily combine this destination with mainland Portugal, but your clients can also go to the Azores directly and just stay on the Azores. And I'd say that that's a good thing that they can get there easily, directly, and just stay on the Azores, because there are 9 islands in the Azores group. We're going to talk about 4 of them today, the 4 most popular islands to visit, but I just want to give you an idea that each island is different. Each island has its unique offerings. And each island is worth a visit for certain travelers. So when you look at these 9 islands, and this map is not to scale, from the furthest east, which is going to be actually Santa Maria, to the furthest west, which is the island of Corvo, it's almost 500 miles. So these islands are very far spread apart. There are ferries between a couple of them, but most of the time when you're talking about visiting multiple islands, you're going to have to do it by flight. There are inter-island flights running just about every single day, depending on which island and what time of day you can go. So it is easy to combine the islands, but you do have to keep in mind that it is a flight for the most part. So 9 islands, where are we going to start? Well, we're going to start with the biggest and probably the most, what I say, popular island, because it has one of the main international airports, and that's going to be the island of São Miguel. You're going to see that on the eastern side, 2 little pineapples there. That's going to be the first island that most people are going to visit. This is where those nonstop flights come daily from Boston, daily in the high season from JFK, daily in the high season from Newark, and also multiple times a day from Lisbon, and at least once a day from Porto. So it's a very easy island to get to. And just to keep things in perspective, all of the Azores total have about 250,000 residents. On the island of São Miguel, you have about 150,000 of those residents. So it's still a very teeny tiny destination, even when we say that it is the main island. I'm going to pause really quickly and just reintroduce myself and Quest Travel Adventures for those of you that joined just after 1 o'clock. I am Erica. I'm the managing director, and here we're learning about the Azores. So we're going to start on the island of São Miguel. It's also called the Green Island. You can very easily see from this picture why it is called the Green Island. All of these islands were volcanically formed. So we're going to see a lot of images with the calderas, kind of like rolling terrain. This is not known as a flat destination by any means, but it's a very lush destination because as the weather moves in and out of these destinations, of these places, clouds get captured, moisture get captured, and then you have a lot of greenery. What's really nice about the seasonality and the way that the weather moves through the Azores is that it's a very, very mild climate. In the wintertime, when it is super, super cold, so we're talking like January, it's going to be about 40 degrees, 45 degrees. In the summertime, when it's baking hot and your hottest temperatures are generally found on Santa Maria, which is the furthest eastern and the furthest southern island, you're going to end up with temperatures, let's say 85, maybe in the sun to 90. So because of that kind of moderate temperature range, everything grows in some capacity. The Azores are certainly known for their floral diversity, which you start to see somewhat in the bottom of this slide. Hydrangeas, different islands will have different colors that they're known for. But this, what we're looking at right now, and what we'll see in the next slides, is the Set Cidade caldera. And this is a very special caldera formed by multiple volcanic eruptions, 7 to be precise, because Set Cidade means 7 cities or 7 little volcanoes that formed this kind of big caldera. And in the center of this caldera, not only do you see an establishment of a small town, but you also see the green-blue lake that they're known for. And the green-blue lake is because of the way that the algae's grown, because of the sun, the way that it's hit it, but it really is distinctly blue on one side, green on the other side, whether you're viewing it from this angle or whether you're viewing it from around. And we're going to see a couple more slides of that. But São Miguel is the main island that people are really going to start with because it's the easiest island to get to. And it's the one where there's the most kind of activity and things to do for your clients. So what kind of things can we do? This is a great picture of some of the hiking trails that you might see. Obviously, this is also in the Set Cidade caldera. This is a slightly different view because we're looking at a different lake, one of the kind of 7 that formed this whole area. And then beyond this lake, you can see the beginning of the blue lake. What you can't see is the green lake that's going to be just on the other side of this lake. So, however, what you can also see here is the ocean in the background because this is a former volcanic kind of like creation, and you can see almost the entire rim here. So one of the big attractions going to the Azores is going to be being outdoors. And whether that's active hiking, where you actually want to climb to the highest peak on the mountain or do more active, or whether it's more passive hiking and you just want to walk along the trails, you can kind of see this person here is definitely not wearing the right shoes for massive hiking. So it's something where you can just take a short hike or a short walk to a viewpoint where you can get these amazing views. So it's an outdoor area, but it doesn't necessarily have to be an adrenaline pumping or athletic type outdoor experience. So I'm going to show you one more picture of the Set Cidade caldera because this really shows the geological formation of the island. So this is taken from one of those in-between island plains coming back to the island of São Miguel. You can really see here how this was a former volcanic crater. And inside there, again, you see the blue lake. The green lake will be just off to the side. It's a little bit covered by the edge of the caldera rim. But this is really shows you a great angle on how this island was formed, how these very interesting geological formations were made, and what the island kind of looks like from the air. This is also really cool because when you take these inter-island flights, you can see the islands on a nice day when they're daytime because you're not getting high enough in the air that you won't be able to get these sort of pictures. So this picture was mine traveling between the islands, not taken by a drone or a professional photographer. So let's talk about other things that you can do on São Miguel Island. We're going to now go from this side of the island all the way to the eastern side of the island, and we're going to go to an area that's called Terra Nostra Garden. Now, because they are volcanically formed, similar to other islands that we know that have volcanic activity, on the island of São Miguel, you do have some geothermal activity and some geothermal hot springs. So the Terra Nostra Garden, which is found all the way at the eastern side of the island, has a 24-acre botanical garden that you can explore. And within that botanical garden, you find the Terra Nostra hot springs. This is some of our clients that are enjoying the geothermal activity and the geothermal hot springs. What's really interesting and what's really nice about these hot springs is that they're kept at a pretty reasonable temperature all year. Obviously, it's the geothermal activity, it's what's coming up from the ground. So whether you're touring there in the winter or whether you're touring there in the summer, it's still very pleasant to get into the waters. The natural geothermal energy here and the minerality is iron based. So you will see that brown orange color in the water, but it's not necessarily dirty. And I think that's really important distinction to make when you see these pictures. But if you don't want to go in the geothermal springs, there's 24 acres of botanical garden for you to explore. Gorgeous maintained gardens, and something is always blooming year round. So you will always be able to see something, whether it's the hydrangeas or whether it's something else. Continuing along the east side of the island and going a little bit to the north, you will find the island's tea plantation. Now, this is something that most people don't actually know about the Azores, is that they have the oldest tea plantation in all of Europe. Due to the growing conditions and the fact that it's never too hot and never too cold, when the Chinese settlers came through in the 1500s, dropped off some tea, dropped off some equipment, and some of the locals started using it first ornamentally because the tea leaves are very pretty, and then eventually learning the traditions of how to make the tea. And it is still a factory that is open, that is available for touring, that is available for tasting, and that is available to just go take a walk in the tea fields. So this is, again, somewhere where you're outdoors, you're having this experience, but you're also not necessarily hiking and working up a sweat, but you can still take a nice leisurely walk through the tea fields and really just experience that sort of different thing in the Azores. Local foods and produce. Again, we're going to go back to the kind of conditions that exist in the Azores year round. And one of those conditions is that they can keep cows outside year round. They don't need barns, and they call them the happiest cows in all of Europe. And they therefore produce cheese. And the cheese making in the Azores and on all of the islands has existed for years. So each island has kind of its own specialty cheese, and they are very proud of each one that they're making. But along with making cheese, you're going to see butter, you're going to see milk, and you're going to be able to taste all of these things when you get there, because there are actually specialty stores right in the main town of Punta Delgada that allow you to taste all of these different types of cheese and different types of production that they make with the cheese. Having these cows also allows them to meat production as well as dairy production. So you have very good alternatives to things that are sourced locally that you can eat, along with all of, obviously, the fishing, and then chicken and pork, as in mainland Portugal. With the cheese production, and again, a different cheese coming off of each island, what you'll also find in terms of numbers and what they're producing is that in the Azores, they produce over 50% of all cheese eaten and consumed throughout Portugal. So this is not only something that is known just in the Azores, but this is known all the way through Portugal, that Azorean cheese is the top of the top. It doesn't often get exported to the United States. Usually here you're going to find just the São Jorge cheese, which is a kind of stinky older cheese. But when you go to the Azores and when you go to mainland, you are going to see their daily cheese, which is a fresh, soft cheese, maybe a little bit similar to a ricotta, as well as some of the spice cheese that they do on different islands. And then even going back to the hot springs, they make a cheese on that side of the island that has a little bit of the sulfur infusion to it. So it's got this natural saltiness that is just really unique to the Azores. So when we talk about going here, we often encourage people to go to the market or to go to one of these specialty stores where you can taste all of these cheeses and all of this local product. And speaking of local product, pineapples. maybe not something that you thought would come out of the Azores, because the Azores are not necessarily as tropical as sometimes we see, let's say, Hawaii, which is known for pineapples. But the Azores have created a very unique way to grow their pineapples and to create a pineapple production where they export over 2 million pineapples each year. Now, most of those pineapples do go to mainland Portugal as well as mainland Europe. So again, we don't get a lot of that here in the United States. They tend to be smaller pineapples, a little bit sweeter. But these are all activities that you can also do with for your clients. Set them up on small group tours or private tours that go to a pineapple plantation, that see and learn how the pineapples grow, and that also are able to taste the local pineapple juice, the local pieces of pineapple, and just some of the really unique ways that they incorporate pineapple, which is almost always a dessert item at the restaurants. I will say, unfortunately, you cannot bring pineapples back to the United States, even though they sell them in the airport. Don't be fooled. For your clients that maybe aren't necessarily interested in the food, the pineapple, the cheese, the tea, you always have golf as another alternative. While it does rain a little bit in the winter season, and that's what keeps it so green and beautiful, golf is available year round. And again, with the mild climate, the courses are never actually closed. Sometimes they close for hours or a day because of the weather, if it's heavy rain. But otherwise, there are 3 courses on Punta Delgada, or on the San Miguel Island on the main island, 1 course on the second island, which I'm going to talk about, which is the island of Terceira. But that's another activity that can be incorporated into an itinerary for your clients, for people who are looking for leisure, who are looking for just something a little bit different. I'm going to take a pause and just address some of the questions that have come in. The first, going back to the hot springs, the brown-orange water will somewhat stain a light-colored bathing suit, so we always encourage people to bring darker-colored bathing suits, but it will not color your skin. It's actually very good. The natural minerals are great for your skin, and again, not muddy. Year-round is when we send people to the Azores. If you're talking to a Portuguese person, they'll tell you that August is the best time to go, because the Portuguese people go to the Azores the same way as like New Yorkers go to the Hamptons or Bostonians go to the Cape. It's their place for vacation. August is the sunniest month of the year. I prefer times like May, when sometimes there's a little bit of festivals. It's the beginning of the spring season. Maybe October, when the sun has warmed up the islands all summer, and there's maybe a little bit less people there. But the Azores are an island you can go to year round. Because it never snows, the weather that you're going to get, when you're going to get weather, is rain or wind, and it generally passes over pretty quickly. If you remember our first slide, going back to where the Azores are located, they're right in the jet stream. So when weather passes through there, it generally passes really quickly. So it may be raining in the morning and then bright, sunny, and beautiful in the afternoon. Going back to our next island, our second biggest island, we're going to talk about Terceira. Now, Terceira Island has some very unique history, as actually it was the only part of Portugal that is Portugal today that was never in the hands of the Spanish during the Spanish Armada and the discoveries movement. So Angra do Heroísmo is a UNESCO World Heritage Site based on its history, its religious history, as well as its kind of mainland history, and it's got a lot of great stories coming out of Terceira Island. From a more modern perspective, it's also the site where there used to be a US Air Force base. And so you will hear people talk about, oh, I was stationed there, or back in, the 80s, we had to make an emergency landing there because it's right in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. So there's a lot of very interesting history in Terceira Island, which dates way back to kind of modern day. It is still considered the capital island of the Azores. It still is the seat of the bishop, so it's the religious kind of like center. And the town of Angra do Heroísmo, which is the main town on Terceira Island, is a UNESCO World Heritage Site because of its unique architecture. And you can kind of see here, it really highlights the white kind of ceramic houses. They're going to have basalt rock used, the black basalt rock used as like pillars, and then the orange ceramic roofs. It's a great marina area there, as you can kind of see based on the little volcanic outcrop there, a former volcanic caldera that's out there. It's a protected bay. So right in the center of there, you're going to find a small city beach, but it's also got a lot um, of whale watching, at boat tours, snorkeling, scuba diving, which you can find throughout the Azores. This just has a great marina for it. So Angre de Turismo, Terceira Island. Why do people visit Terceira Island? Well, it's the second biggest island it's the second biggest touristed island in the group. Again, like I said, there's a lot of heritage from the United States to Terceira Island because of the former U.S. Air Force Base. It's known as the Purple Island or the Lilac Island. Part of that is due to the acidity of the soil, making the hydrangeas a little bit more towards the purple side. Part of that, they say, could be due to the fact that there's a lot more old lava kind of like found on the island. And when the sun sets and it hits the lava, it turns it a slight shade of purple. So people say they see flashes of purple. And what's neat about the amount of lava, kind of, again, old lava flow on this island is that when it kind of switched from being a volcanic island, all the volcanoes went dormant and went to an agricultural island, the farmers took all of those stones and made a patchwork quilt of agriculture on the island. So this is a really neat viewpoint called Sierra de Cum. It's probably one of the windiest points on the island because the wind sweeps through the valley that you see there and kind of comes up underneath you. You can get blown away. It's a really fun place to visit, though, because it genuinely looks very smooth. It looks like someone has taken a tablecloth and just put it down right over some of the rocky terrain, over some of those mini volcanoes that you see, and made this beautiful patchwork quilt. All of those fields belong to different farmers who at one point used the volcanic rock to create different divisions in terms of whether it was going to be sheep or cattle or produce in each of these fields. And so it's become a very agricultural island. It's switched from volcanic nature to agricultural. So this is the Sierra de Cum viewpoint. There's also a lot to do on Terceira Island. And again, everything from a little bit more exciting to a little bit more leisure. One of the things that you see in two of these pictures is a group we took over to the Biscoish Bay, which is naturally formed swimming pools, essentially. And that's where the lava flow created little pools that we've then added walkways and added some safety features so that people can go swimming protected by the waves. So these are like little pools. The Azores aren't necessarily known for their beaches. And that's important because if you have someone that wants to sit out on the beach with their pina colada, this is not the right destination for them. But it doesn't mean they can't get into the ocean. They can't go swimming. They can't be a part of the kind of ocean fresh air community and feel like that they're on an island. And this is one way that the locals get to go swimming, and you will see tons of locals there all the time. Again, it's somewhere that someone goes pretty much year round. We are in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, so the water temperatures are generally on the cooler side. And again, think about that jet stream coming through there. So the warmest times of years in the waters are going to be the summer when the sun is at its strongest. So June, July, August into September as it's like heated up the waters. And then as we go into the colder season, the water temperatures will get a little colder. But it's always going to be warmer than where we are pretty much in the Northeast here in the United States. Another thing that they have on Terceira Island, and I'll highlight it on Terceira, but it's also found very much so on Pico Island, is in the middle slide there you can see the vineyards. Now, vineyards and wine production on the island, on the Azores Islands, is something that is done in a very unique way because you rarely see it the way that we are used to seeing it maybe in California, where you see them strung out on the vines and lined up nicely. Here, because of the winds, they will create little kind of gated areas using that basalt rock. And then within those gated areas, you'll find the grapes growing. Now, the grapes are growing in young soil. So often some of the soil has really high mineral content. It's almost like they're growing out of the grapes. All of the grapevines are much lower to the ground because they don't want them standing up because they'd be blown over. They do have two varieties of grapes that come specifically out of the Azores, Arinto and Verdelho, which are old style grapes that were kind of created in the Azores and still grown there and have made some of their way to mainland Portugal, but they are considered Azorean grapes. And then the last picture to talk about is the lava caves that are there. And the lava caves are very unique because it's one of the few places in the world where you can go deep underground and be able to walk through an area where lava flowed at one point. These caves were created by long air bubbles that formed while the lava was flowing. And then as the lava hardened, the air bubbles stayed there and created a cave. And eventually, like you can see in this picture, the ceiling kind of collapsed and then the caves were discovered. So there are two caves on the island, Algar de Carval, which is the biggest of the caves. And that's going to be where there is about 220 steps if you want to go all the way down in. But you can go just halfway if you want to. And it's a really neat way to understand the geological formations of all of the islands and to really get up close to the idea of how the lava flowed. What's interesting about these is that we talk about it's only available in certain parts of the world. And when we talk about the Atlantic islands and the kind of tectonic plates that run through that area of the Atlantic, Iceland is another place you'll see these lava caves. The Canary Islands is another place you'll see these lava caves. And it's all along that same kind of tectonic plate and that same rift where these volcanic eruptions took place and formed these islands. So once again, we've talked about the two kind of main islands, São Miguel Island, Terceira Island, where there's tons of activity. Before I move on, I'm just going to address a couple more of the questions that came in. The viewpoint with all the wind, Sierra de Cume, is spelled C-U-M-E, Sierra, S-I-E-R-R-A. The ocean can get kind of cold. I don't actually know the temperatures off the top of my head, but I will tell you that I have been swimming in November, I have been swimming in March, and I have been swimming in June. Obviously, I prefer the swimming in June, but it's very refreshing and it's considered very healthy. And again, you will see people in these bathing pools year round. I will also tell you that if you do need any information about any of these islands, I've been to all 9 islands, which some of even local Azorians say that they haven't traveled that much, because it's really important for us here at Quest Travel Adventures, being Azorian Islands experts in travel, to understand all of the islands and to be able to visit all of the islands and tell you why you may or may not want to go there. Because, for example, some of the smaller islands where the population is only 4,000 people may be really beautiful, but if you want a 4-star hotel, it doesn't exist on those islands. Some of those smaller islands only have B&Bs, and some of those islands, so smaller islands, are really only recommended to visit in the summertime when there's a little bit more activity, when some of the restaurants are opened. And I think that it's important to note, as we get away from these 2 main islands that we've talked about, again, São Miguel being the main island, Terceira, the second largest touristed island, we're getting smaller and smaller in size. So the next island and the last island that I would recommend in terms of people staying on is going to be the island of Faial, with the main town of Horta. So Faial Island, actually, and the main island of Horta here, has the biggest, one of the top 5 busiest ports in all of Europe. This port was one of the main kind of places where people were transitioning through when they were transiting from Europe to the United States or to the Caribbean or to South America. And so they would stop in Horta and they would refill in terms of supplies, maybe get some new staff, or figure out something that they need patched on their boat. What's really cool about the island of Faial and Horta Marina is that there came some lore out of the area. There is a really cool cafe there called Peter Sport Cafe. And when you look back as to why it's called Peter Sport Cafe, is it a sport cafe where I might be able to find, somebody's watching a game? It's not that kind of sport cafe. But Peter was originally a guy who could kind of get things done on the island and always had the supplies you need. And maybe you arrive in Horta because you're transiting and it's on a Sunday. And everybody knows Sunday is your day off. So you get there and you're like, but this is the day that I'm set to be here and I really need this to fix my boat and I need something. Well, people would go find Peter, and Peter would be in a central location at this cafe. Well, then slowly it became known as Peter's Cafe, and now it's one of the main places that you should definitely pop into in Horta while you're visiting the marina. The other thing that's really interesting about Horta is that you kind of see in one of these pictures that there's some murals painted there. And that's because as sailors were passing through Horta, it became a way to kind of like give yourself a blessing or a wish of good luck to create a mural, an I was here type thing, only to make it really interesting and beautiful, and kind of wish yourself well. And this was seen as something that was good luck to the sailors, to the boat ride, to the rest of the ride. And this is found all throughout the marina. So this is almost considered like an open air museum of sorts, because as you look through there, you will find some of these murals date back 5 years, some of them date back 25 years, and sometimes older, all throughout. The other thing and the other reason that Fayal becomes kind of the third most popular visited island is that from there, it's very easy to take a ferry as a day trip over to Pico Island. This distance is one of the few places in the Azores where the ferry runs year-round, every single day. Excuse me. And what you can see in these pictures here, the mountain that you see in the background of both the green picture and the Horta Marina picture is Pico Mountain. Pico Mountain is the highest point in Portugal. So while it's not on the mainland, the Azores belong to Portugal, and Pico Mountain is the highest point. So some people want to come to the Azores in order to summit the highest mountain. You can kind of see a couple people doing a leisurely hike around the base of Pico, and that would be the starting point of where they're about to hike up the mountain. They did not do the full hike. The full hike takes a minimum of, I would say, 8 hours, depending on how strong a hiker you are. It is a high elevation, and you are required to get a permit. And the reason that you must have a permit to summit Pico Mountain is because towards the very top, the trails aren't labeled as much. It's one of the only places in Portugal, and certainly the only place in the Azores that gets any snow in the wintertime because of the high elevation, and therefore some of the trail markers aren't as well. So they make you have a permit as well as a tracking device to make sure that everybody that goes up that day comes back. If you have clients that are really interested in summiting Pico, this is also something we can help you with. We can help you get a permit. We can help you do it with a guide. We always recommend going with a guide, whether you want to do that on a private basis or with a small group, just in case something goes on. And some of these guides during the summertime hike Pico every single day. It's really incredible. The demand is there. They're obviously in great shape, and they love it. And this is something they're very proud of, and this is something they love. So Pico Island, while it is obviously named for its peak, and it's known as the Brown Island or the Black Island, and that's because it is the youngest of all the islands. So Pico Island's only about 10,000 years old, so it is the youngest formed island in the Azore group, and because of that, it has the volcanic rock hasn't broken down as much into dirt, so it's still a very dark island in terms of what covers it. It doesn't have as much vegetation as many of the other islands. And what's great about Pico Island, it happens to be where there's the most vineyard growth and the most wine production. And because these vines are growing out of this young dirt that's almost more like rock, it has a lot of minerality. It has a lot of kind of almost effervescence in the way that the wine ends up tasting. Pico Island also, as with the other islands, has some cheese production, dairy production, as well as this island group of Fayal and Pico ends up having a big history of whaling. So there's a big former whaling community and whaling museums on both Fayal and Pico Islands to discuss kind of the different nature of the islands. So I am going to open things up now as I talk just a little bit more. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat. But that's really an overview, and that's what today is about, is just giving you kind of an overview of the Azores, why you want to go to the Azores, what there is to do in the Azores. Quest Travel Adventures, we pay 12% commission on our packages. What you see on our main pages are kind of sample itineraries that you can create for your clients. You can take them as an outline, and then we can say, let's put an adventure program in there somewhere, or let's put a little bit more downtime, or let's put a foodie tour in there, or you can take them just as is. We don't run group departures. We are FIT based. So every single time we're talking to you about one of our trips, we're going to custom design it. We do partner with the locals in the destination on small group tours. So we can work with smaller budgets going on small group tours instead of private group tours. And just a little bit about final picture here. And just to answer a couple questions that are coming in, let's talk about hotels. And I didn't talk about hotels because hotels are a range. In the Azores, we work with B&B, 3-star, boutique hotels. We work with some of the 5-star hotels. Now, there are some 5-star hotels in the island, but they're not the same 5-star hotels that you're going to find on mainland. In the Azores, kind of luxury is celebrated a little bit different. It could be with an ocean view and a just, you know, great service and a spa and maybe a pool on the rooftop. But 5-star is not trip over you service. There's not always, you know, a kind of all the bells and whistles that you might find at a bigger hotel. In the Azores, the largest hotel in the Azores has about 200 rooms. So we're talking really small hotels. A majority of the hotels only have between 50 and 70 rooms. And this is both in the 3-star category as well as the 4- and 5-star category. So it's a really unique kind of different type of travel. All the beaches across all of Portugal are considered public. And in the Azores, they have a lot of environmental rules. So there actually aren't any hotels that are properly built on a beach. There are a couple of hotels that are built next to a beach or near a beach, but there's no such thing as a hotel that's directly on the beach. And this is why, as I mentioned before, with beaches, this is not a place where someone's going to sit out with their umbrella and their pina colada. I'm just going to go back to another picture here while we talk about this a little bit more. Talking about a full day tour, you cannot do a full day tour from Salmi to the Azores from Lisbon. You have to do at least one overnight. There's no ferry, so it's a 2.5-hour flight, and the flights just don't quite mix up to do it as a day tour. It's not worth it. So if you're going to be in Lisbon, this is a multi-night stay usually, because by the time you actually get there, experience it, do 1 or 2 tours. When people are talking about, and Americans love to say, you know, I want to see everything in just a week. The Azores have 9 islands. So it's also possible to create an itinerary that's 1 week long, 10 days long, 2 weeks long in just the Azores, visiting a number of different islands. On our website, you will find itineraries that are maybe 10 days long and go to the 3 islands I just spoke about with a day tour to Pico. So I think that it is possible to do short stays and to add on 1 or 2 nights if you want to, but it somewhat defeats the purpose of what the Azores are about. And the Azores are about enjoying life, relaxing, taking your time, slowing down. So if you really try to check it off as a bucket list, I think you're not getting the full essence. And as I mentioned before, this is a destination where each island is a little bit different. So as we look at this picture of Terceira Island and the main island, and then we go back and look at this picture, and here's São Miguel, and you can see right there that the kind of concept of what this island looks like and what that island looks like is a little bit different. Let's see. So the youngest island is going to be, going back to the islands here, is going to be Pico, as I mentioned. Even though it's one of the bigger islands, as you can see on this map, it's actually one of the smallest populated islands because so much of the island is that mountain. And so it is not one of the most touristed. So as we look here, São Miguel Island, the one with the pineapples, is going to be your main island, your biggest island. That's going to be where usually people first stop. Terceira Island is going to be the second one. You do have to do a flight between those 2 islands. There is not a ferry available. And then Faial Island is going to be kind of the 3rd most touristed. That's where you have the busiest marina of Porta, and you could do the day trip to Pico. Faial Island, and a piece of history that I forgot to mention, is that the most recent true eruption on the island happened in 1958-59, and that happened on Faial Island. And what was created in that eruption is the newest piece of land belonging to Europe. it actually created, the eruption was in the ocean. It created a new piece of land that attached itself to File Island that is about 1 square mile. So that's kind of a neat piece of history. There's a museum celebrating that. There's a lighthouse that was partially covered celebrating that. So who's your clientele that goes to the Azores? It's people interested in nature, in the outdoors. It's people that want to get away from it all. It's people that are interested in food. It's people that are interested in history, Portuguese history. It's people that are interested in geology and kind of formation. Going back to weather, there was a question here about hurricanes, and the answer is in the last 25 years, the Azores have experienced 2 hurricanes. They usually don't get as far east as the Azores where hurricanes are coming up, but every now and then they do. Because of the jet stream, which I talked about before, they pass really quickly. The furthest western groups of Corvo and Flores, which, as I mentioned, are almost 500 miles away from where São Miguel is, are the islands that tend to get hit the most by those 2 hurricanes. But certainly it has not affected them the way that it does affect Caribbean islands. So it happens, yes, again, twice in the last 25 years, but it is not something that they're known for. They get passing storms on their own. Can you rent a car in the Azores? Yes, you can rent a car in the Azores, and actually it's fine. There are mostly manual transmission cars. They do have automatic transmission cars. They are a little bit at a premium, but it is possible. Driving's pretty easy. The hardest thing that I came across when driving in the Azores was that Google Maps will tell me that take a left up here, and you really don't want to take a left because that's farmer land, and they don't really distinct the difference between farmland and main roads. So just use your brains on that one, and don't take the left if it's telling you to take a left and it looks like you're going into a cornfield. Etiquette tips or customs that you should know about beforehand. Really, the main thing is just to slow down. You know, in the Azores, they are a Portuguese community and a Portuguese set of islands, but they're really Azorean first. And it's really important that you should know that Portugal is known, or the Azores want to be known for being the Azores first, Portuguese second. And there's a little rivalry between the islands. You know, when you're on São Miguel, they'll tell you they're the best island and everybody else is dumb. And when you're on Terceira, the same thing will happen. Terceira is the best island. But those islands will rally together and tell you that they are all a better place to be and smarter people than the people from Lisbon. So it's funny, it's a joke, but it's definitely something where they want to be known as Azoreans. It's a great place to go for Americans because they love Americans, and we don't always get that in all the places that we travel. But because of the unique history connecting the US and the Azores, there's a lot of love there. So definitely keep that in mind as a place that is very, very welcoming. What island is best for honeymooners? If these honeymooners are looking for things to do, you can kind of go to all 3 of the islands that I was talking about. If they're looking for the nicest accommodations, São Miguel, just because it is the most developed island. And again, keep that in perspective. We're still only talking 150,000 people, but that is the island that is the best for kind of the higher end accommodations. Fishing is going to be on all of the islands. São Miguel used to have a tuna packing factory, so it's got some really good fishing going on. Terceira Island, and then because of the proximity of File, Pico, and São Jorge, they often say that that's a great feeding ground for the whales, and so that's a great fishing ground as well. Bike rentals. Yes, there are bike rentals. It is probably again, São Miguel, Terceira are the islands where you will see the most access to tourism activities. E-biking events are possible both on São Miguel and Terceira. There are small companies that have set up there, but that is definitely a place where you can do a lot of things. Activities for kids, multi-generation families, the answer overall is yes. And it just depends on how active they want to be. You know, on São Miguel, we can do, again, the visit to the pineapple plantation, educational, fun. Usually the kids get into that. A visit to the gardens, not so interesting for the kids, but sometimes the older generation like that, but the kids get to go swimming in the geothermal hot springs. also, when you go to that area to the east where you have the geothermal hot springs, you can go to Lake Furnace and see where they are cooking food in the ground using that natural geothermal heat. And then you go to a restaurant where you eat the food that has been cooked in the ground. And then in terms of more active, and again, active, depending on where you fall there, can be getting your heart rate up and doing a hard hike, or it can be something like a Jeep tour. San Miguel Island is another place where they have canyoning and rappelling, where they take you on a hike through some of the kind of jungle and waterways that the rivers are flowing. And then when you get to some of the waterfalls, depending on their height, you're either going to be rappelling down or jumping off. And it's a great experience. And they have it at a beginner level. They maintain a certain guide to guest ratio. And so this is something where we've had 8-year-olds with their parents who are maybe in their late 30s, with their grandparents who are in their late 60s. And so it's something that the whole family can get involved in if they are all active type travelers. There are some a couple places on the island where you can do some genealogy searching. They're trying to get more of that online. I often say that traveling to the Azores, there are components of it that feel like traveling to Europe 20 years ago. Things aren't quite up to speed. What you do have up to speed is that all of the hotels have Wi-Fi. Even the city centers actually have some free Wi-Fi available on the bigger islands. So that sort of stuff is up to speed. Some of the hotels are up to speed with handicap facilities. Some of them aren't. There's a lot of cobblestone all throughout the Azores, so it's not the greatest place for people with mobility. But there are a couple genealogy places where you can do some research. It's obviously easier to do that in advance. And if you have someone that wants to do some genealogy, if you give us that information in advance, we can set up a private tour. Give us, okay, they were from this town. This is the name, the family name. We can try to figure out with our guide, and to be able to take the private tour can take you to some of the places, because we do have some people that do a little bit of that research. We just need enough to go on. Kind of just remember, this is Europe. So the currency is going to be the euro. This is Portugal. So the language is going to be Portuguese. These things, even though it feels like you're kind of in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and you're away from Portugal, it is still belonging to Portugal. The good thing about the Azores, as someone traveling from the United States, is that everybody speaks some version of English, whether it's fluent or whether it's enough to get by. Your travelers won't have a hard time communicating while they're there. And then as we kind of come to the end of this presentation, we're at about 50 minutes now, I did want to address one more question, which someone asked, what is kind of the main differences between the Azores and Madeira? We will be doing a Madeira webinar again at the beginning of December, so keep your eyes peeled for an invitation to that. But I would say that one of the biggest differences between Madeira and the Azores is the Azores are still relatively underdeveloped compared to Madeira. The Azores are still, Madeira is off the beaten path. Madeira is also, for those of you that don't know, another Portuguese island group a little further south. But it's been touristed a little bit more. And again, in perspective, these are still groups, but the Azores are even smaller and even more remote, and even more off the beaten path, and maybe even more focused on environmental and sustainability. So things in terms of development are taking even a slower amount of time. So on the screen here, you have email, our phone number, our website. I really encourage you to take a look at some of our base packages. Please email us should you have clients that are interested in this destination, should you have questions that I didn't address. We, again, pay 12% commission on our base packages. We can also give you a net rate. If you prefer to work with net rates, you just have to tell our sales team that when you put in an inquiry. I will be making this presentation available as a recording, and it will be emailed to all of you that signed up. Thank you guys so much for coming and spending part of your day with me. I really appreciate it.